What's up, guys? Lucas Still and Isaiah Nunez with Optimum Athletes here. Today we're going to talk about pull downs, and this one we're going to take a little bit of a different take. We're going to kind of gear this podcast more towards coaches and kind of how we progress guys through, how we cue them, how we kind of evaluate, what situations to interject in and what to leave, and just kind of what we do to try to get the optimal output from our athletes. So, Bug, do you kind of want to jump into it?
Yeah. First, I just want to start by saying that during pull downs, that's sort of their time to take what they've been doing, the constraint drills, and basically give them a little more free range to do what they want and not so much cue them, specifically internal cues. We really want to stay away from those when they're doing pull downs or compression throws, because it's just going to get in the way of things later on. Especially when they're on the mound. If they're thinking about something on the mound, we've been over this multiple times, they're not focused on the goal, which is getting outs, throwing the ball hard, and just competing. So one thing specifically I wanted to talk about was the beginning, when you talk to an athlete who is doing their first compression throw or pull down. Our take on it, my take specifically, is that we give them some sort of structure, but we really want to let them feel it out. So everybody's very different. In these clips, you'll be able to see multiple guys pulling down, and they're different styles of it. We've had multiple people come to us asking questions like, hey, do you see anything specifically that I can work on? And the main thing that we say is it's everybody's different, everybody's body's different, but they also organize different, and they're going to be different in terms of how they sequence and how that's going to look, and how they get into those positions is going to be different for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, there's a million different ways to do it, and you can see it just from, if you go watch any of the old driveline videos, say Casey Weathers, who was one of our founders here at OA, he would take, maybe a 20-foot run-up, if that, to pull down, and then other guys like Trevor Bauer that would start way further back and do a full sprint, and Casey was doing more of a crow hop. So you just kind of got to play around with it and see what works for you. But from a coaching standpoint, as Isaiah said, we start out usually with compression throws, so hybrid A's, where you're acting as if you're coming in from long toss and you're doing maybe one or two steps in a crow hop and throwing, and that's where we start out with. And then we progress to the pull down, where you can have the least amount of constraint out of any drills we do, where they have the free reign to run as far as they want, do whatever they want, fall over to pull down. So yeah, on that first pull down day specifically, as Isaiah said, unless there is something pretty glaring, we'll usually kind of let them go and let them just kind of get a feel for the drill and just tell them, hey, throw the ball as hard as you can. Whatever you got to do to make that baseball move as fast as humanly possible. And then after they kind of do that for a full day, sometimes just from the second pull down, they'll kind of clean up things just from getting used to the drill. But yeah, a lot of it's going to just it's going to be feel. As a coach, you kind of got to feel and be able to look at an athlete and be like, okay, this is where they're struggling, depending on whether it's an actual mechanical thing, whether it's they just don't have the run-up time properly. A lot of guys just sprint out of the gate and they end up slow down. They slow down to turn and throw, which is the last thing you want to do. You want to be accelerating through the throw. So with a lot of guys, we just kind of tell them, hey, start out slower and then build up speed as you go. But for guys that kind of start to get it, after they get it for a couple times, then what do you do? What do you say to them? What do you how do you motivate them to throw harder, basically, is kind of one of the things I want to dive in on this podcast. And something that I've kind of come to realize is, again, it's case by case, and actually getting to know your athletes helps. For instance, if you have an athlete that was cut from a program or transferred from a school because they didn't really like the coach, and say they've hit 89 2 times in a row on a pull and they have one more baseball throw, that would be a perfect time to be like, hey, coach so-and-so says you can't hit 90, or something like that. That kind of lights a little fire and makes them try just that much harder. Another thing for cues that I've kind of gone back and forth with, or used both of, is real versus fake. So if you can recognize an athlete and know that, hey, this guy has the ability to kind of motivate himself if you give him the right info, it doesn't have to be a real situation, right? So it could be something like, hey, if you don't hit 90 here, you got to give up your dog, or something that's not real, but if they can actually internalize that and let it fuel them to throw harder, then it's going to maybe result in a +2 or 3 on the radar gun. Other guys, the second you say that, they know it's not a real situation, so it doesn't motivate them at all. So you got to maybe say, hey, if you hit 90 here, I'll give you $5, and you have to actually give them $5 so they do it, but they might actually get motivated to actually try harder. Is there anything you want to say on that? I got more to say, but just wanted to give you a chance to jump in if you wanted.
No, I think you're doing great. I mean, Lucas has he has a great speech that we like to coin. So whenever an athlete's on his last throw, he'll basically, we have no idea what it is. He'll come up with something crazy, and he'll just whisper in their ear, and they'll immediately fire them up, and then almost an instant PR. But
yeah, I mean, you just got a lot of it's a mentality, right? So most baseball players, and I was one, spent your whole life operating at less than your 100% max. Mm-hmm. So when you get on pull downs and you, instead of throwing 70% like you have your whole life, when you throw 80%, you feel like it's 100%. But usually there's way more in there. So you gotta, as it's our job as coaches to kind of figure out which athlete you need to say what to in order to reach that effort level. So, for instance, another one that I've come to realize is in that same situation, the kid's throwing 88, 89, 88, 89, and he's trying to hit 90 and he hasn't. If you say, come on kid, hit 95, some kids that might work. So this is again, knowing your athletes. Like some kids might be like, oh, if I try to hit 95, I'm gonna hit 91, it's gonna be a PR and it's gonna be awesome. But other kids might hear 95 and be like, oh, they'll internalize that and be like, there's no way I'm gonna hit 95, I can't even hit 90, and then they'll actually try less hard on their throw. So realizing that, if you're trying to give them a number, like, hey, I'll give you $20 if you hit this number, the number should be tough to reach, but it should be possible. It shouldn't be like, you shouldn't tell a kid that's throwing 85 to hit 100. But again, for other kids it might work. So you gotta know, like, oh, if I tell this kid 100, he's gonna try harder than he's ever hit hard before, and he's gonna go +3. So don't be afraid to try and fail. A little trial and error. Definitely, my speech isn't 100% success rate, but it's definitely had a lot of success. So being able to kind of figure out what you can say to an athlete in those 10 seconds between throws that will, give him that little fire under his butt to throw a little harder. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is to realize when is the time to jump in, right? If they've just PR'd or if they're climbing and everyone's excited and there's a good energy in the gym, that might not be the time to say anything because they're on a roll. So you might jump in and say something to try to fire them up even more, and it might kind of kill the momentum. So again, the biggest thing kind of goes back to is feel. But again, you got to be able to realize that it's a drill, and that if you give them a cue and it doesn't work, they'll probably have another pull down day a week from now. So don't be afraid to try different things.
Yeah, absolutely. Be able to read the room and see what's going on. And, if the music's going, if you got guys clapping behind you and, the atmosphere is carrying them, just let it take them. And if it's not, and they're on their own and, they got their headphones in, they're playing whatever they want, then, you can try and chime in and see if that'll help them out a little bit.
Yeah. While we don't love internal cues, sometimes, mechanical, something they say if it's mechanical might work. We had a kid doing a plyo velo the other day, and he just wasn't really generating a lot of power. And I just told him, just try to rotate as fast as possible. And just all of his energy was focused on that, and he went like +4 or something. Yeah. But, again, on pull downs, you usually don't want the person thinking about their body, so that might not be the time to do that. But again, try it from one throw, and if it works, run with it. If not, try something else. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think of some of the cues that we've used in here. The other thing is just I know the difference between motivation and sort of like punishment, right? So if a kid wants one more on a pull down, if he's been 93, 94, 93, 94, and he wants one more to hit 95, and he's used his allotted set of throws for the day, usually whoever's tracking it will say, all right, well, if you don't hit 95 on this extra throw I'm giving you, you owe me a coffee from Starbucks or something, because you're giving them an extra throw that they shouldn't have on that day. And that fires up some kids who are like, I don't want to pay $5 for this coffee, so I'm going to, that's worked a lot. Mm-hmm. But other kids, they need more of the positive reinforcement instead of the negative reinforcement. So I've said it like 3 times already, but just the more you can get to know your trainees, know their story, see kind of keep a mental log. I know Driveline actually tracks their cues and what cues work for certain guys. Mm-hmm. So that's not a bad idea either. If you kind of track like, hey, this kid PRs almost every time we use a positive cue, something like, hey, like if you go +1 on this throw, like I'll give you $5. Or if you go +1 on this throw, like I'll post it on our social media or something that kind of motivates them in a positive way. And then maybe you have someone else where every time that it's like, hey, if you don't hit 95 on this extra throw, you owe me a coffee. Maybe then he PRs every time on that. Mm-hmm. So just kind of, again, get to know your athletes and try different cues and see what kind of cues works for each athlete.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, the main thing that I got out of that was know your athletes and be able to understand them. Like I'm a very quiet person. Just whenever somebody's in the gym, I don't really like to go out of my way and talk to too many people. But I am listening and I'm seeing like who responds well to what and who doesn't, and who's going to be able to understand and just digest what I'm trying to say to them when I am giving them a cue, and who will just completely like ignore and not understand what I'm trying to say. So.
Yeah. I think that goes back to reading the room too. Like if you see a kid that's really frustrated, he's got one throw left and it's just been a down day, maybe you don't interject, or maybe that's a time when you do interject and you say, hey man, you could salvage this day and have a good bad day with one good throw here. So let's go. Like empty the tank, everything you got left. So again, for the fourth and final time, get to know your athletes and don't be afraid to try and fail, and try to remember what cues were for certain guys.
Yep.
So I think that's about it.
That's it.
And if you have any questions on that, let us know. You can reach out to us via email, DM us on Instagram, anything. Let us know if you have any questions about pull downs, pull down cues, or any topics you want us to discuss in future podcasts.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys. Take it easy.